Supervisor Bittinger is absent, and I don't believe he is going to try and call in for this meeting. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I'll move it.
Second.
Second by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Items 2 through 6 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 2 is approval of the minutes of the July 2nd meeting. Item 3 is approval of the claims. Item 4 from Human Resources includes A, approval of memorandum of personnel transactions, and B, authorization to initiate the hiring process. Item 5 from the Board of Supervisors is approval to cancel the July 23rd board meeting. I will be out of town, as will Vice Chair Bittinger, so I suggest we cancel this meeting. Item 6 from the County Auditor is to receive the County Recorder's report of fees collected. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on number 5, will there be, remind me from the past, some sort of calling in to approve the claims, or is it that we'll just catch up the next week?
We'll just catch up the next week unless there's an immediate need.
All right, appreciate it.
Yep. I'll move the consent agenda. Second by Radig. Hearing no discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Item 7 from Secondary Roads is to receive bids for project number parent J178 and return them to the county engineer for review.
So first up, I'm Jacob Gilrath, Secondary Roads.
Thank you.
First we have a bid from Christensen Brothers, Cherokee, Iowa. The total comes out to be $778,989.35. Next up, we have Gaberson Smith from Ida Grove. And that total comes out to be $732,619.35.
Well, that's 2 in a row. I just really hope none of them lose out on 35 cents, you know?
I know. Next up, we have Graves Construction from Spencer, Iowa. Not the best at opening these.
As long as they can build bridges, as long as, the same way they seal envelopes, right?
Yeah.
Well, and this bridge is going to be going right next to radio personality Cowboy Bob's house, so we want to make sure it's a really good one.
Looking at the engineer's estimate, I think he was maybe slightly off on the mulching. See, the mulching ended in 34 cents.
So the total comes out to be $606,900 $718.87.
Is that all of them, or you got another?
There's one last one. I'm just shuffling.
No problem.
The last one is from Dixon Construction, Correctionville, Iowa. And the total comes out to be $690,599.70.
Which is double 35, so.
I would like to motion to the board to accept the bids and return them to the county engineer for review.
So moved?
I'll second the motion by Raddick. Any discussion? All's in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0.
All right.
Thank you. Item 8 from the Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Taylor and Bittinger, for action is authorization to sign letter from the Board of Supervisors to the legislature petitioning for the allowance of an ordinance abating taxes for surviving family members of fallen hero first responders and law enforcement in order to pass a new county tax policy. Whichever one of you wants to go first, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Bittinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the purpose of this really is to ease the burden and honor the sacrifice of first responders and law enforcement. We know that when people put their lives on the line and pay the ultimate sacrifice, their families continue to sacrifice far beyond them. And so Woodbury County can help tax policy for those surviving spouses and direct beneficiaries. And in researching this issue, I relied on the county attorney's office and Assistant County Attorney Joshua Woodman and Treasurer Tina Bertrand let me know there's no provision or enabling language by virtue of a tax ordinance that would allow this. And as you know, we have to have enabling language in order to pass any sort of tax abatement or ordinance. In doing some other research, learned through our Veteran Affairs Department, that there is a provision actually for Gold Star families, those who have lost their lives in the line of duty, to go to the tax assessor and to be able to be abated for their property taxes. But doing so not only sends the right message, but has a practical effect, knowing from a taxation standpoint that, you know, you've lost someone who's no longer there at the dinner table at the ball games, but by whose income is no longer able to support his or her family. And so this seems like a reasonable step and measure. And so Supervisor Bittinger and I would like to put this forward tonight. Have spoken with the sheriff about this, who I think it's fair to say is supportive, and Treasurer Bertrand as well, on some ways that this could go about becoming reality here. I've also sat down with State Representative Bob Henderson and State Senator Kevin Alonso. Both have requested bills through LSA, and so we'll be sponsoring in the House and the Senate. And I've also been in touch with the spouse of a Rockwell City police officer who gave his life in the line of duty, and she followed very closely our board and our actions in extending health insurance for the families of those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. And so I'm appreciative of her thoughts on this as well. And what you have before you isn't to pass this policy today, but is to essentially petition the legislature. So there's a letter that would be signed on behalf of our board to key leaders. And then the other thing that I think that's important to note is there's some provisions I tried to anticipate what would be spoken against this. And so, for example, we can't bind the city of Sioux City or the school district for giving the same sort of abatement. They would have to do so themselves. This wouldn't bind anyone, nor is it a state mandate if it passes. This would simply allow us, or allow you all in the future, to do this, should it be successful. It's for primary residence, it's not for rental or business property or otherwise. But those are just some of the provisions, and so hope that it may gain your support tonight, and those would be my opening comments.
Any board comments?
You've been working on this quite a while, haven't you?
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'm supportive. I wish Bittinger could be here with us tonight, but so we could give him some praise too. But
Yeah,
thank you for your work.
well, I appreciate that, Mark. Yeah, and credit goes to Dan as well for his support and hearing it out and kind of formulating it.
I think it's a good idea to do. I typically don't like necessarily sending letters as a board, but on something like this is county tax policy moving forward, so obviously I think it's something where we're advocating on behalf of the right of the county to make a decision to provide for somebody in a certain way. So we're just asking for this ability, so we're not binding the board to have to make the decision, or any county board in the state, they can all choose. So I think it makes sense to do this.
Appreciate it.
Would you like to make that motion?
Sure. I'd move to approve authorization of the letter from the Board of Supervisors to the legislature petitioning the allowance of an ordinance abating taxes for surviving family members of fallen heroes.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Nelson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you. Item 9 from the Board of Supervisors, submitted by myself and Mr. Bittinger for information only. This is discussion regarding Woodbury County's options going forward after Senate File 2442, Division 5, dissolved all county compensation boards and introduced new powers and requirements. Didn't realize Mr. Bittinger wasn't going to be here till yesterday, but we just like putting his name on things that when he can't speak for himself here. But I'll go first, Mr. Bittinger, if that's all right with you. So by law, all compensation boards dissolved July 1st, so this is just an update to make sure we're all on the same page that at this time, there is no county compensation board for Woodbury County. And regardless of whether or not we choose to reestablish it in the future, there are new requirements to be aware of, and those are attached for you. They include new requirement to show more work, to provide more backup for comparables in the private sector and public sector. It's probably not enough in speaking to our county attorney just to provide ISAC data and go by that. It's important to submit that publicly, and whether or not the board establishes a comp board, that has to be done at whatever level it's, either by the comp board or by the county board. I just want to kick off this discussion because, again, people may not be aware that it's taken effect. And even though I don't anticipate action on this in the near future, maybe even it takes place next year, just thought it'd be helpful to broach this topic and to start discussion with what Supervisor Bittinger and I think is the main case for it and against it. So I think the main case for it is that it transfers the burden of proof to a group of citizens and ideally makes the board meetings less of a spectacle. The board is always accused of some level of bias because we are making that decision, but that's, of course, by state law that we make that decision. And so it does present a level of implied fairness when the board is simply judging the information and the submission and, of course, able to submit its own information as well. So that's an argument for it, but an argument against it is simply it's inefficient, and it also is kind of a tenuous relationship where the board still has the ultimate authority to say, we don't like where this is going, we're going to dissolve this compensation board. It wouldn't be a good idea if you've already asked a recommendation, but you probably technically could. And also, if you're going to be discussing a lot of the same information, why go through it in two different meetings? That's an argument against it. But I think that the limiting factor here, and however we choose to go forward in the next several months, is that there is more scrutiny and more homework required for a comp board if they do exist. And so it would be helpful for the board to get feedback from our elected officials outside of the board, specifically whether it's to the board publicly or just to me, whether or not your representative, or if you can find a representative who is willing to do this, because this is a volunteer appointment, and it does come with some responsibility and now some extra scrutiny. So I'm not sure if the board's representatives would be willing, but we would depend upon everyone having a representative in order to establish this, ideally in the form of a resolution, a template of which is attached, if we choose to go down that road. Otherwise, this is simply put out for information, and come budget time, the board will just decide its own process and judge salaries that way, which are not, again, just for the elected officials, but for the appointed deputies under them. So those are my introductory comments. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just one suggestion that I'd have, given the fact that you have 3 different races that are up, and maybe to revisit this again, no matter our, at least for Supervisor Raddick and myself, we could opine all day long. You could say, well, you're not going to be here for the 2025 and beyond. So that would just be one thought, is no matter what discussion or thoughts are had now, either way to revisit, so that the new members can weigh in.
Yep.
The other one, and this is just something I'll throw out there, I realize that, we've gone through that process 8 times, and it's never been a fun, seamless, and easy one. One of the things that happened was that there was a desire, I think, in fairness, to get caught up. And so probably saw larger increases than is normal. I think that's a fair way to put it. And after that general thing, one idea for the future, and you can take this advice for whatever it's worth, is maybe to go off a cost of living or an average of the unions and combine those numbers. That's one idea. If people generally feel like they are kind of caught up with where the other counties are, that seems to me to be a little more defensible and easier to say, here's a number that is commensurate and a little fairer. So just a couple thoughts.
Mr. Chairman, could you share with us how much the compensation board costs Woodbury County?
I believe it just costs mileage if they turn that in.
I believe that's correct too, but, the whole thing in the legislature was about the inefficiency of the comp board and how much resources it sucks, and it's like, I don't know where that came from. I appreciate both sides of this that you put forward, because I like any time that we can have committees or boards made up of citizens that can help drive us, because I feel like it does a better job. When you look at like the zoning board, board of adjustment, things of that nature, they tend to help us. I mean, we still have that final say, but I agree that it's nice to have another body doing that kind of homework and relay to us. And so I also appreciate Jeremy's comment as far as what the unions or wage plan, what they're getting as far as their wage increase. I think that's very important to take into account. I don't know. I just didn't see this as an important issue for the legislature this year, so I'm not sure why it had to be, but those are my comments.
And because of that legislation, it does require a proactive move by the county to establish before it does take place. And typically that would be, I'd say, the very earliest November, sometimes December, but often January is when the comp board meets. But again, we would have to appoint a full slate of members at one time. We couldn't simply say we're establishing it and not have members. And this is kind of the problem we run into on other issues too. When we say, let's have a citizens committee, well, we got to have members at the time. So we can't just set up something without members. So at your convenience, let us know, elected officials, if you have someone and if you'd like the board to pursue that. And then at that point, the board will still have to decide if it wants to appoint 2 of its own. Any other comments from board members or elected officials? All right. Thank you. We'll move on. Item 10 is reports on committee meetings. Any committee meetings?
update from down at Snyder's Bend. We have 4 cabins down there. All 4 had some sort of interaction with flood water. However, 3 of them, they've gotten back going, and they're going to be actually rented out and back open this weekend. One of them, the last one, the 4th one, got water in the floor joists, and so they're still working on cleaning that out, mold mitigation, that sort of thing. And so no timeline on that 4th cabin, but we're happy that the other 3 are back open. Little Sioux Park, the walking trail was pretty much wiped out. We had to close the swim pond there while we waited for E. coli testing. That came back, everything was fine, and almost everything in that park is totally functional and fine, other than the walking or bicycle trail to Little Sioux Park. That's all I have.
The Commission of Veteran Affairs, I had the honor of swearing in new Commissioner Zane Twerka, and it was great to have him there. The Commission continues to do a great job out in our rural areas. I was at the Vet Center today and noticed flyers for Pearson's Town Hall, July 10th, from 10 to 2, and Smithlands on July 17th from 10 to 2 as well. And so not only are they getting the name and face out there of our commission, but the services that these veterans are afforded, and so that's a great thing.
I'll second that. I see their stuff out and about all the time.
No, and I appreciate, I think our board's tried to lean in, and appreciate the rural representation, and then them leaning out into that area. So for example, at the Salix's Town Hall, they had 14 veterans and 2 who really needed somebody to talk to, I'll put it that way. And I think that's a great success. We also increased our per diem at the county fair because $26.25 only goes so far if you're out there and you're working all day. So that's all I've got.
Item 11, any citizen concerns? Seeing none. Item 12, any board concerns?
So I did want to mention a phone call I got from one of the secondary roads employees. Just wanted to say thank you for the breakfast they got to have, and for us putting that on the agenda, and then for Odo Pub and Grub to offer that for them. They did also mention that, maybe some updates on how our hiring process is going and where we're at. They'd appreciate as a staff, because they're not really hearing anything, so. But those were the 2 comments I got.
Well, if we had updates, we'd share. Unfortunately, we just haven't had anybody apply, so. If you know a good county engineer, get them to apply. Yeah, give Melissa a call.